Welcome back. I'm Dr. Cheek and I'm a licensed clinical psychologist. And today we're going to talk about what it means and what it looks like and what are some of the benefits of embracing self-compassion and embracing self-forgiveness. There are many benefits to allowing yourself to feel some level of compassion for yourself and some level of forgiveness for yourself for past missteps, for past mistakes, and being able to, in some way, learn from that experience so you're able to move past or you're not holding on to any anger or resentment towards self. Now, first, let's identify what is self-compassion and what is self-forgiveness. Now, self-compassion is our ability to tone down a little bit or to turn that volume down on that internal critic. We all have that internalized critic. We all have that internal dialogue for ourselves that says you've done something horrible, you are not doing this right, you're not doing that right. When we practice self-compassion, we turn the volume down on that internalized critic, and we're able to begin to show caring and understanding towards ourselves for past mistakes, past missteps that we've purposely engaged in, but we're taking the necessary actions to correct, or we unknowingly engaged in, and it has been brought to our attention that it was hurtful or harmful to someone else. Self-forgiveness is kind of similar, but it's also different. Self-forgiveness is the ability for us not to hold on to the shame, the guilt, the embarrassment, the feeling of defeat for past mistakes or past failures or past harmful actions towards others. Self-forgiveness is giving grace to yourself for those problematic behavioral choices or mistakes that you have knowingly made in the past that you're actively trying to correct, and taking the necessary actions to correct for those mistakes or those unknown things that we may have done to cause some level of hurt or harm to ourselves or someone else. And notice that with both of those definitions, I highlight being able to take accountability for purposely engaging in poor behavioral choices or poor choices in general and taking the necessary actions to correct. Because it's through that level of accountability that we get to that self-compassion and that self-forgiveness. Because if we don't acknowledge what we've done to cause some harm, we don't acknowledge the choices we made that led to maybe failures in certain situations, then we don't have the ability to correct for it, and then we can feel stuck in that place and not be able to forgive ourselves, to show ourselves compassion, because we're not making space for acknowledging our own behaviors in those situations. So that's self-compassion and self-forgiveness. Now, what are the benefits? Some of the benefits of self-compassion and self-forgiveness is a lowering of anxiety or depression, an increase in hopefulness, the ability for you to extend that same level of compassion or forgiveness to others. Another benefit is to be able to make space to grow and to learn the lesson from the behavior without getting stuck in the fact that the behavior actually happened in the first place. Also, we can stop holding ourselves to unrealistically high expectation in an effort to overcorrect for past mistakes or mishaps. Lastly, we're able to make new mistakes and see those mistakes as individual mistakes, not a compilation of all of the mistakes that we've made in our past. And what this may look like in real life is, let's say you are late to work and you have set this expectation of yourself that I'm never going to be late for work. I'm going to get to work on time. But this morning you had a lot going on. Your alarm didn't go off on time, or it did and you accidentally hit snooze one too many times. Your children aren't trying to get dressed. You're having to get your children dressed. You and your spouse are having a disagreement, or you're trying to think of a plan for something later to happen that day or that weekend. Either way, there are a lot of things happening that led to you being late. Some things that could have been prevented, some things that couldn't have been prevented. But instead of you seeing that mistake, or what you might consider a failure, as a core tendency of who you are based on all of your past experiences, you see it as an individual situation that you are able to correct. When you don't practice self-forgiveness or self-compassion, you start to compile or compound all of your past other mistakes, and you may say things such as, see, I'm going back to my old ways again. I'm going back to how I was 15 years ago when I would get intoxicated to the point where I never got to work on time, where I always lose my job, where I'm not a reliable employee, I'm going to lose my job. So when we don't practice that self-forgiveness and that compassion, we compound prior mistakes that are not similar at all to what's actually happening in this moment, or could have some similarities to what's happening in the moment, could simply be poor time management in either of those cases. However, now we get stuck in the behavior. We don't see a way forward. We don't see a way of correcting what we've done. We see this one mishap, we see this one new mistake as a complete detriment of my ability to continue to move forward. So that's what happens when we don't practice self-compassion and self-forgiveness. So being able to do so gives us a space to be able to see these new mistakes as they are, without compounding all of the old things that we've ever done in our lives and making us feel a lot worse in those moments. So that's a benefit. Now, you may be asking yourself, now, Dr. Cheek, how do I do this? And simple. How do we get to self-compassion and self-forgiveness? Self-forgiveness is the first step in order for you to reach self-compassion. Self-forgiveness requires that you, one, acknowledge your problematic behaviors, acknowledge what you've done, what mistakes you've made, what poor behavioral choices you've made. You acknowledge and you take accountability for those actions. You make the necessary corrections. Maybe you have to fix something that you've broken. Maybe you need to make a new schedule because you have poor time management. Maybe you need to apologize to someone for poor behaviors or bad behaviors or being hurtful or harmful, whether purposefully or unknowingly to you, you've hurt someone else. So maybe it requires a genuine apology. And the reason why I say a genuine apology is because sometimes we apologize and it's not really genuine. It's sort of like, well, my bad. I'm sorry. I'm sorry that you feel like that. And those aren't apologies. Genuine apologies typically sound like, I am sorry that this, and this happened. Moving forward, I'm going to do this, and this to correct for that behavior or to keep that harm from happening again. That's what genuine apologies sound like. And genuine apologies can sound like, I'm sorry if something I've said or something I've done caused you some pain. That was not my intentions. And because I know this now, this is how I plan to correct that behavior. This is what I'm going to do different. So we sometimes dismiss that way of apologizing, but sometimes we honestly don't know what we've said or what we've done to hurt someone else. And it's when it's being brought to our attention that we can take the necessary steps to correct it. Again, that's how we get to self-forgiveness, is we make the necessary corrections. We acknowledge our behaviors, we acknowledge our choices, we take accountability for them, and we make the necessary corrections. And when we're talking about apologizing, one of the ways that you can know if you're practicing self-compassion or self-forgiveness more than anything, is that not only if you're able to give an apology, a genuine apology, but you're also able to receive that apology. What is typically the case is that for individuals who can accept an apology, who don't feel like apologies are ever necessary, that feels like no matter how genuine an apology is, it does not correct for what actually happened, those are typically individuals that have a hard time forgiving themselves. So they are less likely to be forgiving of others. So if you know for yourself that someone apologizing, whether it's genuine or not, really feels like empty and hollow words for you every time, then you may be struggling in some way with forgiving others as well as being able to forgive yourself. And that last step to get to self-forgiveness and self-compassion is to release the negative emotions and the negative thoughts about your past mistakes or past slights or your past missteps. That's how we reach the level of self-forgiveness that allows us to be compassionate towards ourselves. See if you're able to practice those things. See if you're able to identify if my internalized critic is on 10, the volume is turned all the way up, or if I'm getting so stuck in the behavior that I can't see a way of either forgiving myself or making amends to someone that I may have hurt or harmed, or being able to correct for something that I may have broken or something that needs to be fixed or corrected in some way. So what I hope you take from this video today is self-compassion and self-forgiveness are necessary in order for us to continue to grow and experience this life without getting stuck in all of our past mistakes. And I want you to be clear. As long as you're living, as long as you're learning, as long as you're growing, mistakes are going to happen. Purposeful mistakes will happen, and mistakes that you unknowingly engage in will happen. The thing about the purposeful mistakes is the first one is a mistake. The second one It's a choice. And we need to understand the difference sometimes between those two. And when we make those mistakes, as long as we can take accountability, correct for them, and release the negative emotions and thoughts around them, then we can get to a place that we can forgive ourselves and we can be compassionate towards ourselves, and we can extend that compassion and that forgiveness to others when they've made a mistake or misstep towards us in some way. There are many benefits to practicing or engaging in self-compassion and self-forgiveness, and I've talked about some of them, but just that primary one is that decrease in an anxiety and that depression, and allowing for yourself to be human, to be flawed, and to be willing to learn from those flaws instead of getting stuck in those flaws. As always, I hope you take something from this video today that has been helpful, that has been informative, that helps you engage in some level of self-compassion and self-forgiveness. And as always, please feel free to jot down any thoughts, questions, or comments you have below. I thank you for taking the time to listen, and I'll be seeing you again very soon. Thank you.